Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoy video. We're continuing our series on how Lumineth fare in the new GHB season with this part 2 video. If you don't play Lumineth though, or you haven't seen part 1 yet, I'm sure you'll still find this video very helpful. We'll do a very quick recap of part 1 and then review every mission in the new GHB from an LRL perspective. Following that, we'll talk winners and losers amongst the current Lumineth War Scrolls and check out 2 lists that were sent in by our subscribers. With that being said, I'd like to thank everyone who submitted the list via the comments and our Discord. I have loved reading all of your input. If you'd also like to stay in touch or continue the conversation, leave us a comment or join our Discord. Leaving a thumbs up on this video or subscribing to our channel also means the world to us, as we strive to improve our content every week. With the gratefulness and promotion out of the way, let's quickly recap what we've already discussed in part 1. We're obviously in the famed new GHB that was going to focus on battle line. It aims at doing so by making all battle line units with 4 or less wounds and no mounts Galician veterans. Contrary to what we expected though, it now turns out being a Galician veteran is really bad for your health, as a lot of battle tactics and both new battalions make them prime targets on the board. For Lumineth, this means that our best units are now much more fragile. To counteract this, we need to focus on a control playstyle even more than before. That means either bringing a lot of firepower, a lot of movement shenanigans, or preferably both. And although this will impact the way we build our lists, our strengths have mostly remained the same. When we're playing match play missions, we always need to plan how we'll leverage those strengths in the first place. As an elite magic army with an inclination to castling, we usually like missions with a smaller amount of objectives. 3 to 4 are preferable. It's especially good if some of those objectives are already placed in our deployment zone, so we can build our castle on top of them. That way, we don't have to wander outside of our spell and aura bubbles. And if that's what we like, we obviously don't like missions that require us to spread out our forces. In the new GHB missions though, there's a massive variety in the number of objectives, in their placement, and how you need to maneuver your troops to win the game. To be prepared for any situation, we, like everybody else, need to bring units that can deal with expert conqueror hordes. We also need fast units that can either capture, screen, or kill stuff that's too far away for our main force to reach. Lastly, sniper damage is just as important as it was before, usually to kill off crucial synergy heroes and the likes. A usual Lumineth game will look like it has before, where we have our main army castling and slowly moving up if need be, while our ranged threats weaken the enemy army by taking out key pieces. What's new though is that, even more than before, we'll need fast units that can hold up bounty hunters and destroy expert conquerors, or that can claim objectives on the far side of the board. Let's now look at every mission in more detail and how we should approach it as Lumineth players. Prize of Glay is the first mission in the book. You've got 5 objectives that are activated one by the second player that turn. It's a pretty good mission for us, as it has a slow build up. Since we're usually a slow castle build ourselves, with faster units on the flanks, this mission allows us to deal damage with our sentinels while our cavalry gets into position. And we lose no VP while taking our time to do that. In most games with 4 or more objectives, we're instantly on the back foot if you play the Venari build, as it takes a while to get going. Thanks to the objectives only activating one by one, we're not as rushed to get into the fray as we normally are. Both the Venari build or the Fox build would do great here, though their playstyles would vary wildly. The Venari castle will snipe targets, and meanwhile skirmish over the single objectives, while the Fox build doesn't care about going first or second and just moves their stuff to the objectives that are being activated. The Realmstone Cache has a single middle objective that explodes into 2 objectives on opposite sides. Again, this is quite good for us. A small amount of objectives is always an easier time for Lumineth, as we are an elite force. The challenge will lie in the times when we are faced with horde armies that went deep into expert conquerors. They can easily just plonk them down on either side of the objective. As we lack units that have a buttload of low value but high volume attacks to deal with most expert conquerors, this will be a challenge. Luckily, we can ally those in. More on that later. All in all, this mission should be doable for us, especially when running foxes or even cows. If you're surprised by the cow callouts, then hold on to your horses, because there's more where that's coming from. We'll get into the value of mountain spirits in our war scroll section. Battleyes Drawn does away with objectives and instead lets us vie over control of battlefield quarters. It also forbids us from using reserves or teleports. As far as I'm concerned, that last bit is pretty awful mission design, as it fucks over certain armies like Sylvaneth completely. That's why I don't expect this mission to show up often in mission packs. In friendly games, you should always agree with your opponent first, whether you want to play this kind of mission or not. Either way, this is not a great mission for us. We like our units to huddle together for shared buffs and spell ranges. Even fox builds will have massive trouble dealing with this. They can easily get to the core of the battlefield, but they can't kill any expert conquerors that are parked there. If your opponent parks their 60 zombies in the middle of the table, they can just move to the quarter that they want to take from us, and we'll be forced to deal with those hordes first before we can score. The Lurkers Below is an instant win mission, with 3 objectives that don't yield victory points. If you control all 3 though, you just win. If no one controls all 3 by the end of the game, the minor victory goes to the player who's completed the most battle tactics. I like the idea of this mission, even though I strongly dislike instant win missions with a gotcha feeling. This mission is fine for us. We can definitely protect our own objective well enough so that we won't just instantly lose. Completing enough battle tactics for the minor win is doable with most Lumineth builds, even with the less competitive ones. I just focus on doing that and protecting one objective at all costs. Again, foxes are great here, but Teclis is also fantastic. He can camp on our own objective and teleport stuff to the back objective for that instant win if you do see an opening. Be wary though that you're not trying to force that instant win, because when you're spread too thin, it allows your opponent to take away your hopes and dreams in one turn. In the Presence of Idols has 3 objectives, with a simple hold 1, hold 2, hold more scoring chart. You'll also get to appoint 3 idle units before the battle. Units within 6 inches of any of those 3 idle units lose only 50% of their battle shock result. This is an okay mission for us if you play the long game. You will lose points early on when competing with expert conquerors, as they will be able to hold 2 objectives easily. But we can whittle them down and then make a comeback in the later turns. Our units losing less to battle shock is nice, and it's not a weapon we want to leverage to defeat our opponent either, so we don't lose a lot here. And if you are wishing to take advantage of the battle shock, the opponent will probably choose some heroes for their idols, and we can take those out with our sentinels. The only challenge I can see with this mission is when you're banking on bravery bombs from the Cthaler. But then, that's the game you wanted to play anyway. The Night Spats is an interesting mission, as it allows you to teleport diagonally from and to opposite battle corners. This mission can be both good and terrible for us. If you're playing 30 sentinels, I sure hope you've invested heavily in a lot of screens, because your opponent is going to be coming at you from all sides now. You could of course drop a unit in the corner and block that Night Spat forever, but that's an extra unit that's not doing a whole lot else. If you haven't taken a ton of sentinels, this mission is actually very cool to play. You have some pretty fast units, but no guaranteed teleports except for Teclis' teleport. So being able to show up in your enemy's zone throughout the game is great. Playing around with 4 objectives is also quite doable for us. It'll force both armies to spread out more, which gives us time to deal with expert conquerors. Modernized Venari builds will love this mission, by which I mean a minimum of MSU Wardens, a block of Sentinels and 2 units of Dawn Riders. A cow-centric or techless focus build might be less optimal here, though it would definitely be a fascinating game as well. The Mighty and the Cunning lets you score VP when destroying Galician veteran units and adds another victory point if those veterans were contesting an objective. This is one of the worst missions for us, as we'll give away plenty of points with our usual builds. Our Galician veterans will usually be contesting objectives, and we don't have enough high volume attacks to easily deal with hordes of enemy Galician veterans on objectives either. If this mission is in your tournament pack, you should probably adjust your build, simply because certain Lumineth lists might be an auto lose here. Both lists that we'll discuss later are quite decent in this mission though. So what does work well here then? A core of Sentinels is good, but bringing IDK Allies that can deal with Galician veteran hordes is also smart. You could of course try to just bring less Galician veterans altogether. In that case, bring some cows. A Valenar should make quick work from Galician veteran hordes, and he won't cost you any VPs when he dies either. Head-on collision doesn't allow you to control objectives before round 2. You score more VP if you score your enemy's objective though. For me personally, this is a great mission design, as it's easy to wrap your head around. It happens to also work well for Lumineth, unless you're coming up against an Expert Conqueror's Horde build. Won't Back Down is a weird one. Units wholly within 6 inches of an objective rally on a 5+, and veterans rally on a 4+. If this mission is in your rules pack or you're playing this mission in any situation, definitely make your Sentinels veterans here to rally them on a sweet 4+. Other than that, this one can be pretty rough for us actually, if you're building MSU Galician veteran wardens. We'll usually end up losing them in one round of combat anyway, so we gain no benefit from the easy rally. On top of that, our usual damage is mortal wounds that whittles down our opponent rather than taking a full horde of the board in one go. So hordes rallying on a 4+ against our sentinel trickle damage could be a challenge here. There's not really any specific Lumineth build that would do massively better here without opening up yourself to bad times in other missions, so this one will always be difficult if your opponent can make better use of the rally than you can. The Silksteel Nests is a mission where you're burning objectives for extra points. You also suffer D3 mortal wounds if you're close to the objective and you rolled above your bravery. For Lumineth, the mortal wound sting is a little annoying as we are low on bravery anyway. Then again, units that would easily be able to take enemy objectives are wind spirits for us, and they have great bravery. All in all, a rough mission. Burning objectives is always a bit of a challenge for Lumineth, as they force us to overextend and we are usually not tanky or quick enough to survive any real retaliation. There's also 8 objectives, which is really bad for castle builds. I see more and more reasons to bring a wind spirit, preferably Severeth, in every list. Close to the chest lets the defender choose an alpha objective each turn that yields 1 VP when it's being controlled. This is a fun mission with enough of a quirk to make it interesting. We should be able to do well here. It's 6 objectives, but they're relatively close to another. So a win is in the cards for every kind of competitive build here. Turf War is the last mission of the GHB. There is no reserves allowed and summoned units cannot shoot or charge in the turn they were summoned. Other than that, it's just a normal scoring, but you've got only 2 objectives. It's a bit of a weird design again, completely fucking over certain army allegiance abilities. Luckily, it doesn't affect Lumineth Realm Lords at all, and 2 objectives is pretty good for our castle builds, though Expert Conqueror hordes remain a challenge in these kind of missions. That's why you bring specific units to deal with those, which happens to be a very hot topic in our next segment. When we're evaluating war scrolls and building lists, you'll want to make sure you have some fast units in every list. You need those to complete battle tactics, possibly your grand strategy, and also to capture objectives, of course. With expert conqueror hordes being a thing, you also need units that can thin those out. For that, we're looking at units that have a high volume of low quality attacks, so that they can make the most out of being bounty hunters. You also want a lot of non-veteran units that can screen or hold up enemy bounty hunters. For the same reason, you probably want to avoid veterans that die easily and have to fight on the front lines. Units that are simply there to tank stuff but can't kill anything are also more of a pass than they were before. When we're looking at the winners for this GHB, I selected these 6 units. 3 of these are obvious winners and 3 might be a little contentious, which is why I picked them, of course. Personally, I think you could add Tactless to this list as well, with Endless Spells being amazingly impactful right now, but that's something for a separate video. Let's start off with Dawn Riders. They are winners, big time. Fast units are super important for a lot of missions and 25% of your battle tactics. They're also quite good in bounty hunters. They're one of the only units in our own book that can actually deal with expert conqueror hordes. I think you'll never see a competitive list without at least 1 unit of these guys in it, most likely even 2. Blade Lords are the second winners. They're pretty good now when they're bounty hunters. I think some people might have jumped on the hype train a bit too enthusiastically, but bringing a unit of 5 or even 10 won't hurt you, while it did so before. They throw out a ton of attacks against 25mm hordes, but remain rather useless against everything else. The good thing here is that they don't need to be battle line, so they're not giving away VPs by being veterans. If you're looking for a flexible anti-horde damage unit, I'd still look elsewhere. Namarti Thralls, for example, are a straight upgrade from these guys, though they are veterans and you should weigh the pros and cons there. The Cthaler got a hefty point reduction, which might mean she's bound to be nerfed in a new book, or maybe Games Workshop just wanted to sell a little bit more of the Cthaler than they have been doing before. Either way, she's even more useful now when you're playing against hordes, or if you want to try and use big blocks of wardens yourself. She's cheap, tackles our low bravery problem and turns the problem onto the enemy. She's also an extra caster for endless spell shenanigans, so that's great. As mentioned earlier, I actually rate Mountain Spirits quite highly now. They're not veterans, so they won't be an easy battle tactic. Their main problem before was that their high damage attacks were usually saved, and then you'd miss out on 5 damage per attack. But with hordes being more prevalent now, and thus lower saves also being more common, these bad boys actually dish out some hurt. I quite like Avalenor in a lot of lists now, as even his simple -1 rend is good enough to deal with flimsy hordes. If you're adding Purple Sun on top of that, you've got a real party going. And don't forget, when they're in Geometrica, they will tank those scary bounty hunters without a problem. Wind Spirits were already great and are now even better. When playing in a new GHB, there's 3 playstyles: hordes with expert conquerors, Death Star units in bounty hunters, or control units. Wind Spirits are the ultimate LRL control tool, and they're also great for your battle tactics and a ton of missions. Definitely consider bringing one every game, unless you already run 30+ Sentinels. And even then, it won't hurt. Severith especially is a total beast. The last top spot goes to our IDK Allies. Mortar Guard are great as bounty hunters, but Namarti Thralls and Reavers also deliver something we lack, that being high volume of attacks. Thralls do everything better than Blade Lords, except for them being veterans in every game. You could also bring 2 units of Thralls plus a Scryer for a teleport and an easy battle tactic. Reavers are also fantastic in addition to our usual Sentinel units, simply because they do something what Sentinels can do, and that is taking out a lot of models in one round of shooting. where Sentinels deal a small amount of high quality wounds, Reavers deal a high volume of low quality wounds. This is great as a solution against Expert Conqueror hordes, as they can be a nuisance to us. There's also two losers in this story, though it's actually not that bad for one of them. Wardens got hit hard though. They haven't really gained anything from the new rules. They could already fight in multiple ranks, they're an elite low model count unit, so they're not great at being Expert Conquerors, and Bounty Hunters will kill them twice as easily now. Them being the cornerstone of our army makes this a bitter pill to swallow. As we're taking less Wardens now, the Lord Regent might also have lost some value. His greater power of Hish is no longer a crux we need to rely on. I still think this guy is great, don't get me wrong, but he did lose a bit here. We take him so that he can bolster our power of Hish units. Those will not be as prevalent as before though, so you might not need to bring him in every game, which can also be a good thing of course, as you can now experiment with other units. With that being said, what are we actually still bringing though? Well, even though they were losers, Wardens still will always be a part of almost every list, though I would advise running them as MSU now. Sentinels are also still necessary. I think the LRL community is divided on the number of Sentinels you need now. Some people stick to their block of 30, so you can at least guarantee 3 out of 8 battle tactics, where you need to kill something, but others believe 20 might be enough. And I tend to agree with them. 20 Sentinels will still deal with most heroes. The only thing you'll struggle with is monsters, which will not be appearing as often as before. And, of course, also hordes. A block of 30 would also struggle with hordes though, so that leaves only the monster problem to solve. I'd bring Severeth to remedy that. He's fast, has -3 rend on his shots, and can therefore deal reliable damage against good saves. If you're making Severeth your general, it's also an easier battle tactic completed. The 170 points you're saving by bringing only 20 Sentinels, you can then spend on Reavers or Endless Spells for example. Do note that this is just my opinion and that I can still see major benefits to bringing 30. I just advise you to try 20 in a couple of games. If you're used to 30, it will require some time before you've adapted to the new damage results, but it might surprise you what an extra 170 points might give you in return. Dawn Riders are also a must now. I don't think you should ever have a build with no Dawn Riders in this edition. Bring at least 1 unit, or even 2. Don't reinforce them though. Mountain and Wind Spirits are also very good for completely different reasons that we've already discussed. The Mountain Spirits deny your opponent his battle tactics, while Wind Spirits make completing yours much easier. Bring either one, or even one of each. Now let's talk lists. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone who submitted their list for review. Sadly, I could only choose 2 here, and I chose those lists because they fit well with the War Scroll segment we just did. So if your list hasn't been chosen, that doesn't mean I didn't like the list. It's just that these 2 particular lists are great examples of how our usual lists have shifted. The first list we're discussing comes from Siegfried. If you're in any Lumineth related Discord, you'll certainly know who he is. He's been playing Geometrica way before it was cool and has been championing the use of Mountain Spirits for quite some time now. Siegfried went double Mountain Spirits and Avalenor in this list. Note that Avalenor is a general here, as you can then complete this one's mine as a battle tactic. You're obviously losing the command trait, but most of our traits aren't that good to begin with, especially the Geometrica traits. To make sure the cows fight at their top bracket, he's brought along 2 Stone Mages, which is a requirement when playing 3 cows. He's got a core of 20 Wardens, and then the new season classic of 2 Dawn Rider units as Bounty Hunters. I chose this list because we've been so down on Geometrica in the past, and rightfully so I felt, But now I've actually played some Geometrica and cows myself, especially in a new edition. I actually quite enjoy it. And it's strong. Cows are surprisingly tanky when they ignore -1 and -2 rend, and they can hold up against bounty hunters very well. With a stone mage nearby, they also deal with hordes well. Do note that 3 cows here is a bit risky with Purple Sun being out there. If you don't want to go full cow, just know you don't need to. Playing 1 or even 2 is also fine. I play 1 or 2 cows myself, combined with Sentinels and Sevireth, and it's a far better match than most of my Tinder dates. The next list was submitted by Paynut. I chose this list because it's the exact opposite of Siegfried's, and it's more akin to a competitive list we're used to seeing. Paynut is playing Hellon here, so he can bring those 5 wind chargers as battle line, so he only has 2 veterans in his list. On top of that, he's running a Wind Spirit, Sevireth, 30 Sentinels and a Lore Seeker for a savage turn 1 opener. He's also got 2 Dawn Riders, but they're not in Bounty Hunters. The Wind Mage can move the Sentinels around if need be, via teleport, and heal the Wind Spirits if they're within 12 inches. Interestingly enough, Paynut didn't go for any Expert Conquerors or Bounty Hunters here. Probably so he can decide who gets priority, which is key with this much fire support. I personally think this is a very strong list, and you can easily make some changes to your own liking. You could make Sevireth the general, for example, so you can complete This One's Mine, or you could give the artifact to the Lore Seeker, which you can now do as per the new GHB, though the app disagrees. You could also swap out the Wind Chargers for Wardens and choose a different nation altogether. All in all, this list is a flexible build and serves as some good inspiration, I think. And that's almost the end of the video. I'd like to conclude by saying we're still a good army. We do well what we've always done well. Doing those things has become harder though, but there's really no other playstyle we can get into with our current book. The new GHB has allowed different units to shine and has pushed Wardens away from the spotlight. I can only hope we get to experience the build variety in our next book that the new 3rd edition tomes have allowed for other armies. We will of course revise the content in this video when a new book comes out, but for now, I'm curious to hear your experiences and insights. Please leave them in the comments below so that we can help each other out. Also like and subscribe and let us know what videos you'd like to see next. Ryan's eager to get into more Mathhammer with you all, and I've got some Sylvaneth guides lined up until more Lumineth news is released. We hope to see you in the next video. Cheers!